All right, if there are any questions on the topic, we'll try to take them first from the brothers first and sisters first here. And if not, then we'll see what else we have. طيب. Share this interesting quote that I got in this tea bag. It says, "There's nothing that keeps its youth, so far as I know, but a tree and truth." Olive Wendell Holmes Jr. From that which I know, nothing stays young forever, except for two things, he said: a tree and hawk. Allahu Akbar. Truth never gets played out, never gets old. The truth is never trendy. The truth is never coming and going. The truth is always true. Think about that with regards to clothes and sneakers. It's from the 80s, but it's a classic. You can still wear it, right? No matter what, because it's a unanimous classic. Those sneaks, that, right? This is never ever gets old. That which was okay, it was all right, it was nice, it was hot, it was this and that, it was fresh, but the trend has to come back. But that which is established classic, the truth is always what? You can always wear them. No matter where you are, no matter what time, whenever what's in, you put on that jacket or those sneakers, you can always rock them. Is this not the case? That's the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It never ever gets old. And Allah knows best. All right, first question says, Tayyib. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you can send me a personal email, inshallah, Brother Joshua, Jazakallah khairan. RM from Hanover, Germany. What is the ruling on reading fiction? There's nothing wrong with reading fiction with conditions. And from those conditions is that you have to have a goal or an end in mind. Some lesson or wisdom that you're getting from that fiction. Another condition is that the fictional reading should not dominate the factual reading. Secondly, is that you have to have the ability to separate and differentiate between the fiction and the fact. And some scholars, they say, with regards to reading fantasy and watching movies of fantasy and cartoons of fantasy, some of them say why it's haram or why it's at least disliked is that it has an effect upon reality and how you think about realistic things. Because you watch so much fantasy, it bends and outstretches your imagination. And when you see things or read things that are real and factual, your mind just can't go back to its natural elasticity. So the same applies to reading so much fiction, novel, movie, so much. You start living in that fake world. And you start seeing and perceiving things through those fake lenses and goggles, and that's a problem. So if you don't read too much of it, if there's a wisdom behind it, if you can separate, inshallah, there's nothing wrong with reading fiction or having a story that's fictional, all right, with those conditions. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Next question says, from initials RM from Hanover, Germany. Is it discouraged to read tafsir and hadith all by yourself without a teacher? No, it's not. Reading is one thing, acting upon it is another thing. Reading is one thing, interpreting is another. Reading is one thing, passing it on to others is another. So you can read what you want to read. Implementing it, putting it into the physical world is a different story. Teaching a class on it, you haven't been trained, you haven't been taught, you don't have the true understanding of it, that's a different story. There's nothing wrong with you reading beneficial books. All right? Also, it depends on the reader, and it depends on what you're reading. There's some students of knowledge, and even some layman Muslims, that can read certain things by themselves. Everything doesn't demand or necessitate a teacher. That's an extreme. Many people, they take things to the extreme. Man kana shaykhuhu kitabuhu, man kana kitabuhu shaykhuhu. He whose teacher is his book, he whose book is his teacher will make more mistakes. That's not the prophets. Those aren't the prophet's words. That's first and foremost. It's not the Rasul. The Rasul did not say that. It's not in the Quran. It's a statement of some of the pious predecessors. Whoever's teacher is his book will fall into more mistakes, will do things wrongly more than he'll do them correctly. That's not the words, they are not the words of the Rasul. And even if it was a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, there's an understanding to that. So sitting with scholars and teachers, having an ustad, for sure, that is the way of Islam. But that does not mean that you don't read by yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't have your own personal ijtihad. All right? You study with the teacher and you also read independently. And if you're a true student of knowledge or an intelligent Muslim, you know the power of reading. I like to read books. I read by myself and I would read with other people and to other people. How can that? All right? So what are you reading? How clean is the book? Fabricated hadith in the book? And what's your level of understanding and maturity? Very important word. Many people are scholastically and intellectually immature. Scholastically small-minded. All right? And they don't have the maturity to read a book and to understand that it's not the Quran. They don't understand it's not Sahih Bukhari. Every hadith is not supposed to be Sahih. No one ever said that. Oh, you can't read this book, don't read this book because it has this in it. Who said that this is Bukhari? Who said that Sahih Bukhari is the Quran? Every single thing is authentic from wall to wall. Who said that? So many people, they lack basic maturity when it comes to books. Reading something and running off the cliff, going extreme with it. It's knowledge. You sift through it. Well, heck of that. So it depends on who's reading, and it depends on what is being read, right? There's nothing wrong with reading a book. Rather, it's encouraged for you to read and study by yourself as well. And Allah knows best. Next question says, RN from Lanham, Maryland, USA. Assalamu alaikum. Is it permissible for someone to seek out workers in different countries for the sake of paying them cheaper? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There's nothing wrong with that, inshallah, as long as you're not oppressing them. As long as you're not wronging them. If the price of labor is cheaper in another place, you find somebody online to make you a logo in India, in another country at a fraction of what it will cost to get a logo made in New York City, that's fine. As long as you're not wronging them and exploiting them and doing things that you shouldn't be doing to them. But there's nothing wrong with having a hustle and competition in prices. There's nothing wrong with that. And Allah knows best. Next question says, Barakallahu Fiqh Mahmoud G. Jazakallah khairan. And this was AM from London, UK. Does making dua in English lessen the reward of sunnah prayers, since in fard prayers duas must be in Arabic? I don't know about that with regards to lessening the reward. In general, the Prophet ﷺ said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray like you see me praying. Pray like you've seen me praying over the amount of days that they were with him. So this is a supplication that the Prophet made in the sunnah prayer. You do that and you say it in the manner and the language in which he said it. And for sure, if you come as close as you possibly can to the Prophet's description, this prayer of his prayer, the way of his prayer, you have a higher reward in general. And if you say a supplication in another language or another way that he said it, then it's not exact 100%. All right. What's important is the scholars of Islam, they have spoken on the ruling on making dua and prayer in other than the Arabic language, in fard and nafil. And Allah knows best. Next question states, initials MB from Toronto, Ontario. What are the manners of publicly criticizing a scholar's view regarding any issue? The Prophet ﷺ tells us that the religion is sincere advice and transparency. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us that whoever sees an evil, he should fix it with his hands, etc. So therefore, there's a manner of giving advice. There's a manner of fixing an error. There's a manner of disagreeing. And there's also a manner of shaming and backbiting and slandering and causing scandal. They are not the same. They're very different. Whoever has a sincere intention, and whoever has common sense, and whoever has enough knowledge even to be talking about this type of issue will understand the differences between the two. Shaming someone versus disagreeing with them, advising them, or even refuting them. Refuting a mistake or an error, or someone who's in error, refuting somebody is not the same as shaming someone and turning into a scandal and a slander fest. And of course, the shaitan has been very busy over these years mixing the two and blurring out the edges of the two. You know, when you use something like Illustrator or Photoshop, you blur the edges and you blend it in with another image. That's what the shaitan has been doing, and getting people to think that I'm refuting this person, I'm refuting his mistake, and I'm warning from him. In actuality, it's a scandal and slander and shaming someone. So there's a difference, all right? If you have enough knowledge to even be talking about a scholar and his opinion, you'll understand the differences, because you have the access to those books that the ulama wrote on those differences, right? And Allah knows best. Next question says, from initials CW from San Francisco, California. Assalamu alaikum, Mufti. Does a person pay zakat on camels and such properties because they are used commercially or because they are simply owned? Tayyib. So to simplify things and to keep things easy, there is no zakat due on your personal possessions like animals. I have a horse that I ride. I have 2 or 3 horses that I ride from time to time. I'm raising a few horses. Okay, I have some camels that I ride, etc., or for milk. The zakat is due on you having a number of those animals which are no longer for personal use. For you to have this amount of camels, this amount of sheep, it's not for personal use, obviously. It's some type of interest and profit being made. So if you have a camel to ride, a horse to ride, there's no zakat due. Your personal house, there's no zakat due, etc. All right? As far as commercial interests, then most of the scholars of Islam say zakat is due on merchandise. Not all of the scholars, but most of them. That you have to pay zakat on that which is for buying and for selling. What's important is it depends on how many camels you have and what are you using them for. And Allah knows best. Inshallah, you let me know, Abdullah, when there's no more time. Question says, from initials IB, London, UK. What is the permissibility of numerology of the Quran if one doesn't intend to claim to predict the future, but just to gain possible insight? Well, the Quran is a magnificent book, a tremendous book. And the Quran is a bountiful book. Allah says it's Kareem, it's bountiful. It's full of bounty, it gives a lot. It's limitless amount of bounty that it gives. And of course, there are different depths and levels of the Quran and secrets of the Quran. And what we mean by Asrar al-Quran is nothing batini. We're not talking about no batiniya type stuff. Only these men know about it. No, we're talking about the study and the research and the gift that Allah blesses the servant with to have a more in-depth understanding of the book. We're not talking about nothing else. When we say a secret, all right? Some type of specific order that only a certain amount of men can get to and know about. No. We're not talking about that. So therefore, if someone discovers something from numerology or other than numerology, and it's proven, and it's tangibly established, so be it. as far as us making the Quran into some type of mathematical Rubik's Cube, or some type of special system, these amount of verses, these amount of days, this angle, this la. Not only is that dangerous, but it's oftentimes flawed. And people can prove the exact opposite. They can use numerology, they can use different quote-unquote coincidences to prove the Trinity. Or to prove that the last hour will be on this day and that day, etc. We talk about different percentages and numbers. This is very, very, very slippery slope that you're walking on. Let alone that opens up the Quran for every Tom, Dick, and Harry. The disrespect of Quran and to say this is what Allah means, and this is what Allah wants, and this is what this verse really means. And the scholars for 1400 years understood the verse like this. I have a new interpretation. And we've seen much misguidance come from this. From the older brothers who've been around for some time, Seen people claim all types of things from numbers and these types of things. And Allah knows best. Next question says, initials RN from Lanham, Maryland, USA. What is the permissibility of a Muslim family spying on their nanny by way of camera, audio, just listening from other rooms? Well, it's impermissible for a Muslim to spy on a Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ warns us about people eavesdropping on others and listening to people's conversations without their consent, and how lead will be poured into their ears on the day of judgment. The Prophet warns us against these things, intruding upon people's space and privacy. The nanny, Muslim or not, is in your house, hypothetically or supposedly. So you're not technically spying on them if you have general surveillance. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with checking the cameras from time to time, as long as it isn't someone's super intimate personal space. But that which pertains to your child or your children and them doing their job, you have doubts that are warranted. That's a different story, right? It's the difference. But the Muslim is never supposed to just be spying on people and looking into people's personal affairs without a justified reason. And Allah knows best. Initials SM from London, UK. How to know if an opinion is shadh in fiqh. That's relative. You study comparative fiqh, you'll find the three imams here and the fourth imam there. Malik, Shafi'i, Ahmed have a view, Abu Hanifa has a view on the side. Or the opposite, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and then there's muhakada. Shadh is always relative. All right, as long as the opinion is supported by proof and evidence, then there's khilaf. Shadh view is a view that has no proof, no evidence. It's just against all of the evidences, the overwhelming majority, unnecessarily. That's a different story. And Allah knows best. RN or RM from Stokey, Norway, is studying philosophy haram. It depends on the student and it depends on the philosophy. Someone who's learning or studying philosophy for an end, to refute the falsehood in it, to guide the Muslims, etc., etc. Versus someone who's just studying it leisurely. Someone who has a strong basis in Islam, in its aqidah, etc. Versus someone who isn't educated in Islam. So it depends. And the word philosophy is a very vague term. Philosophy is a relative term. I understand what you mean, Aristotle, so on and so forth. But the word philosophy has different usages, right? But the concept of mainstream philosophy, doubting this, everything is questionable, everything has to be proven through human reason, etc., that is destructive to faith. And if you study the history of philosophy, quote unquote, and the history of philosophers, you'll find that they were at direct odds with the religious people. And the same applies to scientists. Not saying that science is false, but if you study the history, you'll find that the whole reason why they wanted to study this was to debunk the church and to prove why belief in God and the faith and pre-decree was irrational. So you have to be careful. And Allah knows best. Inshallah, it's time for the adhan now, I believe. We'll stop here tonight. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all success. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.